steering wheel. Lots of steering wheel here. Give him steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
Your leg, mate, please. Your leg.
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph? Did you hear me? From our radio. Ralph, acknowledge. Come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down that interstate.
Hello. Oh boy, this is the Glasgow Willy Wonka podcast. That's what it is. Hello and welcome back inside the Park for May for podcast 877, the Bahrain Grand Prix. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it.
That's
Come on,
exactly
Todd.
what we do on race weekends. But before getting in to the race weekend, I have to introduce my guest.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy. It's
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul.
Hey.
The start of the WEC Series 2024 campaign, hard racing, hops over the pond, goes to the Middle East, boom, P2.
Yes, that was an amazing start to the year, right?
How about your boy Ian driving
Ian
like
did a
pro?
fantastic job. He sure did. Yeah, I was talking to him today, and I'm like, you know, the difference between the IMSA and the WEC races, how they run. It's like every lap, even the beginning stint of the race, but to the middle, to the end, all count because they don't do a lot of yellows and safety cars, and everyone catch each other up, pass arounds, etc. Literally, you earn every second on the track, and that's exactly how it worked out. So Ian did a phenomenal job getting the car close to the front, and then the other guys were just duking it out with the Porsches to and fro, and didn't get the win by about 4 seconds, but you know,
what happened? You had a little spin or something from
Alex had a little spin, and that lost us a little time, a little bit in traffic and everything. He did his best to make up for it, but wasn't quite enough. As said, you lose 5 seconds due to a little mistake. It's so hard to gain it back, especially when the other guys are pounding out as hard as they can. But yeah, class of the field, us and that Porsche. So we think we won. We got that position by a lap over the other Aston, which is our old buddy Marco Sorensen in third place. So yeah, it was a great weekend. I mean, we'll take it. Going into that weekend up against all the factory teams and the level of drivers and everything, you know, we'd take a podium every day of the week. So
absolutely.
Yeah, won't cry too much about the win. We will take those points and run with them.
Take the points and run with it, man.
Yep.
Yeah, good weekend.
Yeah.
So that was a big launch this year. It's right up. WC launched, MotoGP's getting ready to launch. And I don't know if you noticed it, but Formula One had a race, their first race.
Oh, I
of the
thought it was
season.
still testing. I thought
it kind of looked like
testing.
it, didn't it? Yeah, that was good. Yes. So we're going to talk about that. It started in Bahrain. We're going to talk about the Bahrain Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And unpack that as we always do. Have a little bit of formation lap, just a little, some wordsmithing so we can wade into the lukewarm waters of this.
It's kind of like your notes. As I said, lots of spacing to fill out 2 full pages of notes.
Spacing.
So we'll do the same thing with the podcast. We'll do lots of, painful pauses maybe just to kind of try and get to an hour. I don't know.
A lot of double spacing and aerial. Maybe there's this Aptos. No, it's aerial.
Yeah. Let's go back to that first point again.
Yeah. I just want to talk a little bit more about that one point. Say more, Paul. Can we talk about tire pressures on the back left again? Formation. So after testing for 3 days, the drivers certainly know this circuit well, and there's not a lot of surprises for them other than wind changes and how dirty the track may or may not be by the time they got back for the race. But it's not to say that there aren't challenging corners there. I think there's a couple corners that are pretty tricky. The track itself, very porous, very abrasive on tires. So if there were any cars that were abusing their tires last year, this would be a real good proving ground of whether they've solved that. And it looks like a lot of the teams did, if I'm honest, on Saturday. So that was good. The wind and cool temps, unseasonably cool temps, were a bit of a curveball for the teams. Winds changed directions completely come race day. All weekend leading up to, pretty predictable where the winds were coming from. And then for race day, really turned and came the other direction. Pretty stiff winds, so that caught some of the teams out. A few drivers saying they struggled with the wind, others saying they benefited from it. Which car was the fastest? That's what we all wanted to know. Where does Ferrari stand? Where would Mercedes be with their brand new car, brand new chassis? Would anyone make life tough for Red Bull apart from Christian Horner? That's what we wanted to know, right? And that's what we were looking for. That's kind of what we found out.
Slavering at the mouth. Anticipation was at this level. Yeah.
Oh, man. Nail biting. Yes. On the edge of seat action for the Bahrain Grand Prix. No doubt about it. But before we jump into the team's fault, what's your just overall thoughts about that track?
The track, yeah, I mean, it's got a nice flow to it. Not all of them do. Little bit of elevation. I kind of like the challenge of the S's. Certainly that long left-hander leading into the tight left, very tricky under braking. If you've got a braking problem, it'll really exacerbate the situation at that point. And then the next turn coming down that little straight into that left-hander is a fun one, certainly in qualifying where they really get to throw it in there. So I think it's an okay track. We've had some good races here, quite honestly.
Yeah, we have.
So if the timing is right and the cars are in the right place, then it is a track you can definitely have some good dicing with. There's a couple of positions where you can do the undercut, dive inside, get up, and then attack back. So I think it's a good track to race on. Unfortunately, I think everyone was, as said, leading up from a lot of testing. Everyone kind of knows exactly what they're going to do. So there's there's a lot of unpredictability to it, I suppose. Yeah. Apart from, as you say, the wind. But which is a tough thing to do because the wind you can't see, but it has a massive effect on aerodynamic cars.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, let's jump into the teams a little bit. We'll talk about that. We'll start the running order at the top where they finished because that's what we do. We're going to start with Red Bull. I got a WhatsApp message from them. No, I didn't.
Some pictures. I didn't really look closely, but yeah.
It's a joke. This is a joke. I'm folding. I don't want this. Okay. Sergio Perez, P2, Max Verstappen, P1, testing, FP1, 2, and 3, and even qualifying, to me, suggested that Max may not enjoy the big advantage that he had last year. But he took pole to victory with a commanding 22-second lead over his teammate Sergio Perez, protected that from the very start. It's a great start to the season. He had fast lap. That's the cherry on top. Max said that the balance of the car felt great and that the win actually helped him extract a bit more out of his car than previously in that weekend. I don't know. Yeah. Take that with a grain of salt. Maybe it did. I don't know. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it's just hashtag just the wind. Right?
Yeah. Maybe they're just trying to.
Maybe use the wind to hide the fact that he just turned his engine up to normal.
Yeah. It's funny how many questions they get asked during the weekend and it's like, how much more can you say?
I know.
When think of something negative, Max. Okay, well, wasn't that great in the wind last week, but it was even better now. So I don't know.
Yeah, a couple of the shifts were kind of hard.
Yeah. I wonder if that's code word for go slower. Yeah. But I mean, going into the weekend, I mean, there's always going to be some questions, certainly is the main thrust or idea is that Red Bull still have a great car because it's kind of shown itself over those 2 days. But you never know if something rears its ugly head in a race pace. Everyone's kind of playing games a little bit up until qualifying. But ultimately, we saw what we saw and it was what it was. But I think everyone's panicking a lot. And if we thought this was going to be leading from one race to the next, but it is still the first race, and everyone did have a lot of time to get the car sorted out. They're not going to have that luxury in the future. So Red Bull could be caught in the back foot a little bit, and some of the other teams may be able to make better decisions over a race weekend in the future. So I'm not saying all is lost for the season yet.
Yeah, it's kind of what I put in my notes. Fans are already bemoaning the performance as another year that we paddle our way to the 2025 season when there's a lot of seats open, or even really the 2026 with the regulation changes. This is going to be another ho-hum and all that. I like you, Paul. I'm not sure. First race, right? I'm not sure it's that cut and dry. Reliability can always have an issue. Teams will aggressively upgrade. The Horner issue could see a shakeup at Red Bull that could unsettle the team. I mean, who knows what could happen at this point? So anything could happen. So I'm not one of the guys that watch the first race and say, "Oh gosh, you won by 26, and I'm done for the season."
Right.
I think there's still a lot to play for out there, and we have to see what happens.
Yeah, as you say, it could come from the inside out. Quite honestly,
it could be. Yeah, very well.
A lot of stuff going on around there.
A lot of stuff.
Very strange.
A lot of politics and power struggles going on.
Yeah,
in Formula
absolutely.
1 right now.
We kind of thought that might happen. Once Dietrich died, that was kind of everything was the same, and Dietrich was the last say on everything. But once you kind of spread it out, you have committees, you have power struggles start gradually bring themselves to the top, and that's kind of what we've seen over the past couple of years at this point. Right,
it is. And the other thing, you've got those situations with the politics, and then even today it was announced that another guy who's been on, had a target on his back from a lot of the folks in the paddock is the FIA president, who now is accused of trying to impact the outcome of a race. So now there's a big investigation. I mean, it's like I wrote an opinion piece today. It's like, what the hell's wrong with F1? What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
It kind of makes Max's spanking party, German-themed spanking party, a little, pedestrian compared to this.
Right. It's I mean, maybe it's a good thing for F1 to keep themselves in the news if it's a boring race or this or that. But, F1's riding a wave here, and if they get too many of these, it may lose all the opportunity that they gained, Yeah,
they got to be careful, and I'm sure they know that. Other side of the garage, Paul, for Sergio, he did what he needs to do all year long, which is finish right behind Max, score maximum points. I don't want to overplay this. To me, you tell me, you're a professional driver. To me, he looked a little more settled in this car from last year at the end of last year. I hope he can keep that up. I hope he is a little more at home at this car, balances a little bit more to his liking. There's a lot of people angling for that seat in 2025. So, he had some nice battles with Carlos, Charles, and George too. Looked on form to me, but does he seem a little more settled in that car on Saturday to you? Yeah,
I mean, certainly he was okay at the beginning of last season too, but certainly, how we saw him struggle the last half of the year. He's in an interesting space, right? As you say, there's so many people that could be vying for his seat. That's a lot of pressure. But the best thing for him to do is forget all about that and enjoy the ride, quite honestly. The one negative obviously is the qualifying, and everyone talks about, he finished 22 seconds behind Max. Well, yeah, but he had 4 cars to get through to even get up to second place, so he was fighting for every position at that point, and obviously Max is driving away without any incumbent. So I think the gap was closer pace-wise between the two, although Max may not have been trying as hard, but Sergio needs to get on the front row so he can keep Max in his sights and show that he's a worthy guy for that second seat. It's unlikely he's going to save the seat because of all the other people vying for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Make the most of it. Get some race wins. Don't cause a kerfuffle. Do the job and take the race wins when they're available there, because, a seat like this is not going to be available probably next year or ever again for him.
Yeah. He's CV building at this point.
Yeah.
I meant to say big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. So if you're a Patreon supporter, I send out a link on our Patreon page, and you can join and be part of our audience live while we're recording. So big hello to all of our Patreon supporters. Steven said spicy Yuki, Alpine resignations, Horner messages, MBS investigation. DTS is loving it. Yeah. And then Ian said drive to survive after dark.
Oh, very very dark, yes.
Yeah, very dark. Hey, Fabio, thanks for joining. So anyway, thanks to you guys. Glad you're joining us for this podcast and able to join us live while we're recording. Let's jump into Ferrari. Charles Leclerc P4, Carlos Sainz P3. Charles lost a spot to Russell early on as he was struggling with locking brakes on the front end of his car, and said that he had 100-degree brake temperature delta between right and left differential. Charles said that he was also pushing to the right whenever he braked, and he fell behind his teammate, fell down to fourth, and really brought it home fourth. It sounds so, Paul, I'm not asking you the definitive because you don't work for Ferrari, but in a case like that where you've got one wheel brake, heating up massively, what do you got going on there? Yeah, so I would say there's something to do with the ducting, where the ducting was blocked or something on one duct and causing a differentiate between there. And if there is a temperature, then all those symptoms are going to occur, right? The car's going to grab from because one side's going to be hotter than the other, so one side's going to be more grabby than the other, so it's going to make it kind of start darting around. Obviously, once again, it's an imbalance. Once a little more grabby, it's going to start locking up tires. So he was always having to brake a little earlier, a little lighter, could never get the maximum braking into the car. And there's no way of fixing it unless they found that problem during a pit stop, which apparently they didn't. But I'm sure when they look into it, there was something going on there with the ducting that made the temperatures rise. And they said all those symptoms derive from that. I would imagine, Paul, not being a driver, but I would imagine if you're in that GT3 Vantage of yours and you're coming down hot into a left-hander and you're getting ready to try to get that car to rotate, hit the apex, and all of a sudden when you start the braking zone, it wants to go right. Yeah. That's got to wreak havoc with trying to get the car to rotate, It does. And, I've had it happen before, and sometimes you have to nearly time the movement of the car for your turning point. If the car's moving around a little bit, you hope 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'll turn on this move, and you just have to try and make the most of it. It's an adaptation, which a lot of the drivers don't have to do nowadays because they have so many controls in the car to control that stuff. Which, my whole thing was always, don't have so many adjustments in the car, let the drivers adapt to things. But unfortunately, that's not the case. That's why you see him pressing the steering wheel about 5 times on a lap. But unfortunately for Charles, if there's something in the ducting, there's no adjustments in the car you can do left to right. Maybe you can do front to back and to alleviate it, but there's no way of solving that problem from in the cockpit. Yeah, for sure. Other side of the garage, Carlos didn't have an amazing start, but he made up for it on track. And while Max was in a different world from him, Carlos and Ferrari were able to show good long run pace, reduce the delta to Red Bull from last year, and not chew their rear tires off in the process. For me, as a Ferrari fan, I think that's the biggest news out of this weekend, is that they weren't just ripping up the rear tires like they were last year. Ferrari also do seem to have pace enough to fight McLaren and Mercedes for the best of the rest. Should Red Bull be the dominant team, at least Ferrari's in the hunt for best of the rest. Last year they struggled so much with that rear end of that car, and they developed that car all year long, Paul, and still never really got on top of that issue. Right. So heading into this race, abrasive track, one track, you'd think that the backs would suffer wear rate or deg rate on the rears. If that chassis was a serial abuser, this would be it. But hopefully, fingers crossed, that isn't the case, or at least it didn't seem to for Carlos. And he drove a really good measured race, passed his teammate, got up there in the hunt, ends up in P3 for a podium. A good move for him. And Paul, as you said on last week's podcast, this is kind of what he needs to do if he doesn't want to be just the other driver. If he's leading the points, that's good for him. Yeah, as Frederick saying in the text there, absolutely, he did everything he needed to do to keep himself moving. I think he was a little flattered by the fact that Charles had a little technical issue, but can't take away from him that he made the most of the opportunity, which is something he really needs to do. I mean, there's no way Carlos can go a year without a seat, so it's like, which seat is, he showed enough pace and poise to justify him staying in Formula One. So it's just a matter of how far up the ladder he can slot into
when he has to walk out of Ferrari for sure. But yeah, a great move, some great passes, solid job by Carlos.
Yeah, it was. Down in Mercedes, you had Lewis Hamilton P9, George Russell P3, no, it's not P3.
No.
What am I talking about?
Hamilton was 7th, right? And Russell was 5th? 5th.
I got to change this 7. I didn't change my notes. That's terrible. See, I do that live. There's no editing, folks. I just change this stuff live. P7, P5. George overtook Charles early on and looked competitive at the set. He was running up to P2 at one point. He got jumped by Perez during the pit stop and then was told to lift and coast due to, now initially he had brake heat issues like Charles had, but then later he was told to lift and coast because the engine was overheating. They were having engine overheating problems. And that was a real issue. It also seemed to plague the other Mercedes fitted Williams cars too. Was this cooling issue as well as Lewis's car. And so they're doing a lot of lift and coasting. And, is that just an issue for the Merc engine leading? They have to have a rethink on the intake, how much air they can bring into that engine. Is it simply an air over the cooler issue? Is there some other issue why it's overheating? That's things that both Williams and Mercedes is going to have to look into. McLaren didn't really report that they were having overheating issues, so one might suggest that it could be air. So, for George, though, to end up coming back up, looked actually a lot more. He and Lewis both looked a lot more competitive later in the race, and but he did manage to drag it all the way up to P5.
Yeah, I jumped in on the replay into George's car at the end to kind of see what they were doing with the lift and coasting and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I heard was, you can stop lifting, coasting. I can't remember which turns it was, but because they didn't need to save the tires anymore. So tires were also an issue, overheating the tire. So I think they were managing the car a lot. And obviously we saw it had some good pace in testing, etc. But I think overall in the race, they've got some issues that they have to deal with that, probably be tough to solve before next week. I'm a little more worried about next week because it's going to be hotter. And these are what happens. I mean, we got all cars finish the race, which is amazing for a first race of first season, all brand new cars. I know the cars look the same.
F1 said it was the first time that's ever happened, I think.
Yeah, probably in the first race of the season, I would imagine. The cars look similar, but they're all completely new cars. And there's a lot of things that are different because that's what the upgrades do, and that's what Ferrari did to change their car to make it better, and Mercedes the same. But yeah, Mercedes definitely managing some stuff which might be a little difficult to turn around before they get a little break in the action. They could go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think the car has pace. I just don't think it has a race pace right now because of those issues. And it could be where they had to start the car for fuel, for certain lift and coast. Obviously, you're expecting maybe a yellow flag, a full course yellow to kind of conserve some fuel a little bit. They always under fuel cars, so sometimes that comes into play if the race just keeps running green flag to green flag. So it's just a judgment call on how much fuel you start with, but definitely
could be
some other things as well that they're managing. So hopefully they can turn that around a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's a brand new chassis, new concept. But you're right. If they were managing tire heat, and that was an issue, managing engine heat. These are the small things. I say they're small. They're probably pretty large in scope, but still, those are all things they'll have to solve and probably will take to get into the development cycle for that car to solve some of those things. So we'll see. For Lewis's race, Paul, he struggled initially with recharging his battery. I'm not quite sure what that issue was or how that was solved. Maybe just a little rusty. Maybe there was a legit problem that he had to do a reset. I'm not quite sure. But once that got sorted out, he radioed that he had broken a seat. Not he broke it, the seat broke. And they also asked him to lift and coast more. Like George, I think he was pretty quick later on in the race and was trying to make his way toward the front, but settled for P7. I think all in, I'd say that it wasn't the race that Merck wanted, to be fair, but the brand new car may need a few tweaks to really get it to come on song. It's a car that they say is compliant to upgrades, something they can work with. So let's hope they can fix all the little niggles to fight Ferrari for best of the rest. That's certainly what they want to do. They want to win, but they got a little work to do to get there. But for Lewis's race, a little bit of an outlier for him.
Yeah, I think so. Broken seat is nothing to be sniffed at, quite honestly. It's happened to me before, and it completely throws away your feel. I mean, you're strapped in there, you're as tight, there's a lot of time spent just getting that seat right. And remember, Lewis was pushing the Mercedes team to move him back a little bit.
Yes.
So crucial where you sit in the car, how you sit in it, as to how you get the proper feedback from the car. And he's been whining about that for 2 years. They finally listened to him and they said it made a big difference. Saying, if your seat breaks every time you turn in, you move in the seat, and normally when you feel that movement, that's the car moving, and so you react to it. But when in the broken seat, it'll be inconsistent at best, but certainly the feeling would be very, very a little spooky, honestly.
Yeah,
because the car's moving around, feels like it's moving around than it actually is. So I could definitely say that Lewis actually did a hell of a job to keep the car in P7. Obviously I don't know how far this seat broken was, how bad it was, but any kind of movement in the cockpit when you're driving a car with that many G-force is a big issue.
Yeah, it is a major deal. Let's see, McLaren. We got Lando Norris P6, Oscar Piastri P8. I believe that's right. Now I'm questioning my whole existence, whether I have the grid positions right. One concern is that Norris was complaining early about his rear tires, and that's not a great thing, but let's hope that can be cured in setup. Oscar kept Lando on his toes early on, but when Lando, and I'm wondering if this didn't actually play into Mercedes' hands. There were a few cars that once they burned that fuel off and they got light, Paul, they really did kind of come on song and looked a lot more competitive. And I think that's what happened with Lando. Once he got that fuel burned off, he got a lot quicker and really started to look competitive, finishing up in P6. Lando said that unlike Max, the wind direction change actually hurt them on Saturday, but he ended up in P6 as a good run. Both cars, and the points, but yeah, he looked more competitive later in the race than certainly at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it was a solid start for McLaren. Think about where they were last year at this time, right? It's really confirmation that they carried on their form from last year, which I think is all good, really. Right. And yeah, everyone's still until you're in a race, you still just don't know exactly how it's going to be you can do simulations all you want, but the track is very different. Obviously the conditions change, but it's more how the track is, and in the height of competition, all the drivers are driving a different way. So to really know how your car's going to behave is that's the only way to do, is actually be in the race. So I'm sure they're going to take some lessons learned there. Try and figure out if the car did come alive at the end, then maybe there's a bit more compromise they need to make so they don't lose so much ground at the beginning. But these are all fine adjustments, not cross the board. Let's tear up the paper and start again that they had last year. So I think McLaren should be fairly happy. I think they're within that grasp of Ferrari with some adjustments made. So I think just move on.
Yeah, it'd be good. Zach, I think, said that even though they have a brand new wind tunnel, this car wasn't designed in that wind tunnel, but all of this year's upgrades will be. So let's hope they solve that. Oscar looked like he may follow Lando, home into P7, but Hamilton was very quick, as I mentioned, late in the race, managed to undercut Oscar. Oscar gave it hell coming out of the pits, but Lewis had warmer tires, managed to get around him and drop him down to P8. Overall, I think, as you said, Paul, I think McLaren are thereabouts. May just, and there is a consideration from my part that I think, this could be a little track specific too. Maybe there were issues there with the tires and the abrasiveness of the track that we may not find in Jeddah. Who knows? But I do think they did. I think as you said, rightfully so, is that what it does tell me out of this weekend is that McLaren kept that momentum they had at the end of last year going into this year, which is a marked improvement for the team. So good on them.
Yeah.
Excited for him. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, P10, Alonso in P9. Lance had a good start moving up to 10th, but then he got punted from behind by Nico. That left him dead last. So Lance stopped early for hards, and then he stopped early again on his second stop using the undercut to his advantage, made his way back up into the points, ceded the position to his teammate, Fernando, who was on fresher tires, to come home in P10. So kind of hard to blame Lance. I think actually he had a pretty good recovery drive back to the points.
Yeah, I think the strategy worked out great for him. I mean, he was literally dead last, and so yeah, I think it was actually a very strong run for Lance. I mean, the strategy was right, but you have, as I always say, you have to execute the strategy as well and do the hard work, making the tires last and making the most of that extra grip you have to do the undercuts and make them and execute. So yeah, I think all round, Stroll should be pretty happy with this weekend.
Yeah, I think so too. Fernando couldn't hold off the McLarens, and some wondered if he was even going for a one-stopper. He really boxed late for his second set, and this left, precious few laps to try to mount any offense against Piastri. Fernando said that really they kind of rolled the dice. They were staying out really late on both stops, hoping for a safety car that never really materialized. So that's kind of what happened there. But he did get back by Stroll, ended up in P9 of the points. He said that's basically where they thought they'd finish. So, the last year, the surprise Fernando passing Lewis and passing everybody to get on the podium, not to be, or at least it isn't starting out to be that way in 2024. But I wouldn't say all is lost. But it's clearly an evolution of last year's car.
Yeah, absolutely. Not all is lost. I think, they didn't have a lot of threat from behind. So why not?
Lonely race form, really, right?
Yeah. So why not throw the dice in there and give a go for a safety car and grab a couple, 2-3 positions that maybe your car was not going to earn. I'm not sure where the car is. I thought they said that they changed it quite a bit from last year. So, hard to say where this car is at. I'm sure they're disappointed in not being a bit more of a threat, but I think Alonso, had a good qualifying. I think it's still got a shot at it. If not, they're not going to surprise anyone this year, right?
Yeah. I think you're right. So the Kick F1, Kick Steak Formula One, Sauber Kick F1 Steak team. Yeah, Valtteri Bottas.
What am I going to have for dinner tonight?
Kick. Oh.
No, that doesn't sound very delicious at all.
Steak.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I like my Valtteri medium rare. Let's see. You've got him in P19, Joe Guanyu, P11. Joe took the Stroll gambit, following Lance Stroll, boxed early for both stops, trying to make that undercut work. And it did on large part because it kept him near the points for most of the day. And I thought Joe had a really tidy race, doing some great defensive driving too. To manage to P11. He just needed a little bit of more pace or some luck. He would have been at the points, but I thought he had a hell of a day, all things given. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it was a great execution by the team and by him. And as I say, he had a lot of heat on him there at the end of the race. He could have easily ended P14, quite honestly, but he held on to it. So I think it was the car and team overachieved for this weekend. They've looked, just about a little bit better than the Alpine team at this point. But to get all the way up and be a threat for the points, I think was actually pretty sensational for both him and the driver and the team. Yeah, I agree. Valtteri had a tougher day. He had that 52-second pit stop with the wheel nut, and that pretty much paid. That was it. I seem to remember this has happened to him before. What does he do when he's out there? I don't know. How does he weld the wheel nuts on? Yeah, why is he doing that? Stop it, Valtteri. Yeah. What's up? I'm going to blame his butt. Okay. That's Valtteri's butt. Speaking of rare. Yeah.
we need Valtteri's new 2024 butt calendar where he's holding a wheel nut. Would be good.
Yeah. Well, he definitely needs a new hairstylist. I'll tell you that much. But.
Yeah, right. Haas F1, Nico Hulkenberg P16, Kevin Magnussen in P12. Nico looked like the Haas driver to deliver this weekend with a Q3 qualifying. But during the race, he got a slow start and then punted Stroll, leaving a damaged wing. That prompted an early pit stop, putting him at the back of the field and out of the points. Nico said that the positive was that their tire deck looked really good, and he thinks they are in the fight with Williams, Kick Sauber, and Racing Bulls.
Now, he didn't get a penalty for that? Hitting Stroll?
No, I guess they kind of deemed it a first turn racing incident.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The new, kindler, gentler FIA stewards, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Derek Warwick must have not been there.
Yeah. If it was Max and Lewis, there would have been a whole lot of different rulings.
Yeah. If Max had done that, or Lewis, that would have been a good story.
Yeah.
So
that's Haas, whatever. Don't give them a penalty. They're at the back by the end of the race anyway. Their penalty is being Haas. Honestly.
That is, when you just look at it. Yeah, that is the penalty. So, that was tough for that. And K-Mags, he had a better day, quietly making his way forward, held off Yuki and Daniel, held off both the RBs for P12. And that would also suggest that maybe Haas got on top of this rear tire abuse they had last year, which is great news. If they're not chewing the rear tires off their car and they've got some good down, straight line speed, then they could be factors at places like Monza and high speed circuits, even Jeddah. They might do better than expected. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I think it was really good for them to hold on like that. I mean, literally, they've been, sinking like a stone. And usually, as I think I said last year, maybe you counter that and don't try to push all the pace out of the car, but the pace was there too by Hulkenberg's qualifying. So I think two very positives for Haas, actually, the qualifying pace and the longevity under tires. So, maybe, hopefully, for them, not the laughing stock of Formula One for this year. And we know who that is right now.
Yeah, we do. Ryan Reynolds.
Ruined everything.
Nice investment. So, and it does, I had said, I did every year I do a sort of a F1 preview here locally in St. Louis, and I said in there that the Haas had more testing laps than anyone. Now, A, that tells you that reliability is pretty good, right? But B, I do think they were really running long paces, long runs. They really wanted to make sure they got on top of that tire wear. Yeah. And so that's really good. I'm glad they did. So that's good. Speaking of VCARB, Visa Cash App, RB.
Are we speaking of that?
Yeah.
We are
I think
now.
it was. I am now, damn it.
Yeah.
Don't be an
nice
effing
segue,
jerk.
Todd.
This is stupid. we need to, revisit this whole thing, Paul, and figure out what's going on. So you got Daniel Ricciardo P11, Yuki Tsunoda P. Was that right? P8? If I got my numbers right, did I not update all of these? This is
definitely. Yuki did not finish P8.
No, he didn't. Yuki was in 14th.
Yes,
Daniel was in 13th.
A very sour 14th.
My notes suck this week.
Yeah, they really are. You just really pulled it in, didn't you?
Well, I was so busy, adding all the multitude of notes and bullet points. I didn't go back and update the finishing positions. This is ridiculous. What kind of podcast is this? This is ridiculous. I want my money back.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, you need more help, idiot. Obviously.
I do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm underserved, Paul.
Yeah.
As far as a podcast content creator.
That's for sure.
Influencer.
Don't get much help from me, so.
It's hard to
Paul,
be
would you like to review the notes?
Paul?
Yeah, perhaps, Paul, when you read the notes after I've sent them to you hours before the podcast, you might want to just help me out and edit through them, make sure there's no glaring errors that are going to appear during the actual podcast. I'd be more than happy to help you, Todd, but I just
sure you would.
don't.
Here's this is Paul's copy editing. Oh, I got the notes. Print key.
Yeah.
There they are. That's what we're going with. You live and die by it, buddy.
I'm still reeling from concussion from my karting this weekend, but
yeah. Yeah. You blew up your engine.
Blew up my engine, blew up my old shoulder. From leaping over other cars' tires and stuff. But hey, finished the race in the end. That was all right.
Got to play hurt, Paul.
I was hurt.
You're a hammer.
Yeah.
West Ham guy.
Exactly.
You got to play hurt.
I know.
Hey, you guys beat up on Everton this weekend, too.
Yeah, I know. That was nice.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Good.
It wasn't just Bowen scoring goals this time either.
It was kind of embarrassing for Everton.
Yeah, that's good. We'll keep it that way.
Yeah, right. Let's see. So, that's Dan was struggling with handling when he was in traffic, he said. Which is interesting. Mm-hmm. He said he was struggling in traffic.
He was. I rode around with him because I was trying to, and like as soon as he gets up behind a car, just the front end just disappears.
Washes out.
He just got nothing. And that's why he struggled there at the end, making headway even after Yuki let him by finally. But the car was not good running behind cars.
Yeah, his used softs at the start didn't help him either. He said the hards weren't much better, he said, but when he got to the new softs on the last stint, then he said that the pace really started to show up. And there again, I would suggest that maybe fuel load had something to do with that too, right? Yeah. So his newfound pace late in the race caused some drama within the team. The team asked Yuki to move over. Dan was on soft compounds, and Yuki dragged that moving out of the way out
like
for
2 laps,
a meal out of that. Yeah, he made a meal out of that. It took quite some time, and then finally, when Dan got around him, Yuki is on the radio yelling and F-bombing, and it was crazy. Eventually, he let him through, but then at the end of the race, the cool-down lap, as they're heading back to the paddock, Yuki damn near runs into Dan.
He
runs up right next to the side, and Dan was like, what the hell? It's like, the guy's a helmet.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. I jumped in Yuki's car too. I don't know what he was doing on that slowdown lap. He's like, down. He's like over-revving the car on a downshift, coming to a crawl, then just full throttle. He was just driving like a angry idiot. I mean, abusing the car. It's like, Yuki, that's your car, that's your motor. What are you trying to do? And then just playing games with Dan, nearly taking him off, locking his tires up, then coming back on and giving him the old, the elbow going by him. It's like, okay, well, Dan didn't ask you to move over. Yuki needs to go, man. Honestly, I've got no time for that guy at all.
I don't either. That guy is seriously suffering from red mist and can't get out of it.
Yeah. And I still don't know why because we have a plethora of good drivers, even in Formula 2. Why are you holding on to Yuki? I don't get it.
Why would you put up with that? I know he's fast, but why you would hold on?
He's fast-ish. He's not fast enough to be like that. Lewis Hamilton isn't fast enough to be like that, and he doesn't behave that way, No,
Lewis doesn't behave that way.
No.
I would have Liam Lawson's butt in that car so fast.
Yeah.
I would. Steven said MBS told him not to. So, yes, I would. Let's see who we have.
Let's talk about Dan a bit, though. I just want to talk about this a little bit because, honestly, I know Dan. He only finished one position ahead of Yuki, but the call came 2 laps before Yuki actually finally let him by, and by that time, the gains from the soft tires running behind. As I said, he had a little bit of trouble riding behind people, and having to run behind Yuki needlessly took an edge off the tire. I think if Yuki had let him by when he was asked, he would have had something to fight with, would have got by Magnussen, and potentially could have got by Zhou. But, I mean, they never would have called Strolls, but best place would have been P11. But Yuki's fight to not let Dan by, which he should have done, really cost Dan 2 places. Not points, luckily for him, but still not happy with that guy.
I agree. Boy. Yeah.
But aren't you surprised? I thought the car in general should have been better than it was.
I did too, Paul. I made a note when I was taking notes in the race. I was a little disappointed. I really thought the RBs would be a lot faster than they should.
Yeah.
And, maybe, and Zach shouldn't be too ticked off, if they're finishing down there.
Right. Right. Nothing to worry about here.
He was really upset about Red Bull owning 2 teams. And,
right.
I don't know. Red Bull, you got Franz Tost kicked to the curb. You got this thing with Christian Horner going on. It's like anything else. It's like when Toto was killing it at Mercedes, then everybody comes after you.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody comes and they poach your people and they tear you down. And that's just kind of the way it is. But I really thought RB had hit the ground coming out midfield.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope they turn it around. Maybe it's track specific. Yeah. Track limited.
Track limited. There you go.
Speaking of track limited, let's talk about Williams. Oh, yeah. You got Alex Albon. Do I have this right? Probably not. Alex Albon.
Sargent definitely came last, so I think you're okay.
Yeah. 15th and 20th. I'm all right. All right. 15th and 20th. Williams had issues with both cars early on, with both engine overheating. Logan had an electronic issue on Saturday, which caused him to flat spot, or on Saturday. Then during the race, he had the same electronic issue, caused him to flat spot the tire, run off, finally got rejoined to the track. Logan's issue was stemming from the steering wheel, which is brand new this year. Williams was the only one that had that permanent dash on the car.
The last of the cockpit mounted,
Yes, last of the cockpit mounted displays. And now they put it on the wheel, and both the drivers were having issue with it. Alex couldn't change his settings for a portion of the race. When he changed his bias or whatever it was, they weren't changing.
Didn't do anything, yeah.
So, and as soon as I found that out, Paul, I thought, this is what Paul was talking about on last week's podcast. It's one thing for James Vowles to come in and get the low-hanging fruit and pick up some of the more, I guess, the obvious things to fix in this team. But these are the granularity. This is the granularity. These are the little things that you have to ferret out, right? And you were talking about these things won't be like an episode of Bewitched. You can just pull your nose and fix. It's going to take some work, and James has to root all this out, right?
Yep, absolutely. He's going to find out, who is a solid worker. There's lots of things to. He'll figure it out, but he's going to have more fires to put out for sure over the.
He may find out that the guy back in the steering wheel department, little Jimmy Yips, never really knew how to solder, and he's over there, just putting too much solder.
Lied on his resume.
Yeah, right. He's like, wait a minute, you got a guy who's never soldering these? What the hell? Who knows? That damn Jimmy Yips. Okay, so that was Williams. And then finally, we come down to Alpine. Pierre Gasly was at 18th, 17th. Ocon. Alpine were the talk of the paddock, starting at the back of the grid and even, finishing at the back. They were a lap down to the leaders at the end of the race. This, to me, Paul, is a 4-alarm fire at Alpine. They had their head aero guy and head technical chief leave the team. That's not good. And it all led me to say, I have a solution for Renault. You came back, you bought a team, you've been kicking a can down the road. You should be fighting for wins by now because you're Renault. And at this point, here's your solution. Sell it to Michael Andretti. Sell the team. If you're not going to get real and get in and do it right and get a real team boss and all of that stuff, then sell it to Andretti while the property is hot and worth money, right? Sell it to Andretti and let Andretti do it.
Yeah.
There's your answer. 2 birds with one stone.
Right. Just stick to making mediocre engines, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know. Renault there's always been something going on there politically and lots of controversy inside the team for eons, quite honestly, which always thwarted them from actually winning a world championship, which they never did.
It's been going on that way since Napoleon and Josephine.
Yeah, till Alonso came along. I guess they did finally win one, but
until the cheating Flavio
until they cheated.
Right. Yeah, right. That's funny. Yeah, it's tough. And in Drive to Survive season 6, I think Christian Horner summed it up best when he showed up for the team boss interview on Thursday or whatever it was, and Bruno Fami shows up and he's like, "Oh, you're the new team boss?" He goes, "Yeah." And it was awkward, and Chris goes, "Oh, okay." And then they asked Christian in part of the interview series portion of that DTS, they asked him, he said, "Well, Renault news." And he says, it's hard to tell what the hell's going on over at Alpine.
Yeah, it is.
And I think he's right.
Yeah.
It is.
Every 3 years they reignite the next 3 years we're gonna plan, we're gonna program, we're gonna start winning, we're gonna do this, and it's like
we're rebuilding.
12 years on, you're still doing it. Yeah, we're rebuilding over there. Mm-hmm. So anyway, well, that's the teams. That's what we think about them.
Spencer says Alpine soundbite should be from Inspector Clouseau.
Yeah. Does your dog bite?
Hello, Paul. I'm on my phone. That's crazy.
Good.
Yeah. Says now I'm in Australia. Yeah, crazy. That is nuts, isn't it?
Lucky you got that whole new internet thing.
Yeah, well, that's that.
The other year, whatever.
Yeah, right. I got the. That's just the beauty of the internet service I have. It just goes out just for no reason. I didn't have that when I was on fiber, but I got this incredibly riveting text and said. Spectrum is experiencing a internet service issue. Expected resolution is at 7:30 p.m.
Yay!
That's what I need. That's exactly what I need. I mean, it's not like some of us are podcasting or anything.
No, it's not like we have more things to do. We're not busy or anything.
No, not working or anything.
Yes.
So, all right, where did I leave off? We were ready to move over to Donkey.
Awards, I think, right?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Donkey of the race. Who do you have?
Donkey? Are we going Donkey? Did we do Move of the Race already?
Oh, maybe we'll start that over. Because I don't know that we did get to the move. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Move of the race. Who do you have?
Move of the race. I have Carlos on Chuck. What more do you need from Carlos Sainz than to, dive bomb from 5,000 miles behind Charles and stick it in the corner? He did come from very far back. It was surprising. He was lining him up for a pass, obviously, but to do it right then and there, I think caught Charles by surprise also, actually. And also, it's making the move and they taking their position, but also kind of showing your team, what they're going to be missing next year, right? So, did you pick the right guy? Well, Carlos is out there to prove wrong, and he did a pretty good job.
Right. Yeah, I had Sainz originally, and I was thinking that there was also a really good over-under the alley-oop by Perez.
Yeah.
At the end, I thought it was pretty good. He looked pretty good on that one. So, but I think it's a good one. Let's see. Donkey the race. Who'd you have? I think we both had the same here.
It's got to be Yuki. He's donkey of F1, in my opinion. He should just run with a donkey decal on his rear wing. Every week, I think I could pick Yuki as a donkey for some reason. And that's only what we see. There's so much more going on in Yuki's car. If you ride along with it for a whole race, you just wouldn't even believe it.
Yeah, that's so true. Let's see. Then we've got drive of the race.
And I had to throw it to Carlos again. I mean, he did what he needed to do. He did a great job. He made moves. He made passes. He passed his teammate. He did a very solid job for himself and for Ferrari. So couldn't think of another better person for this award.
Yeah, I was torn. Certainly Carlos is one of them. I think he won the vote on the website. And I was thinking George had a good race. He was struggling with quite a bit out there. To come back up
for sure.
P5. He was running in P2 there for a little while. He had a good race.
He was feisty at the
Sergio
beginning, for sure.
He was, very feisty. And Sergio had a good race, too. So I'm a bit torn on that. So anyway, all right. Well, apologies, folks, for losing the interweb in the middle of a podcast. Apologies for that. A huge thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for joining us live. Sorry about the hiccup, but this is the challenging and complicated world of podcasting.
That's right. That's why we need the Patreon dollars to pay for the high-end equipment.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, thanks for joining us. Let us know what you think about the race and the teams and the drivers. And until then, you can go to the website, theparkforme.com, share your opinion. Huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you like the podcast, share it with a friend. Tell some folks about it. Don't keep it all to yourself. And that would be helpful. And you can go over to Apple Music or whatever your podcast player is. Give us a good rating over there. Give us a little love. That would be appreciated. And then until next weekend, when we come back and do it all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a.
Next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend, Paul. We got Jetta.
Wow.
Next weekend.
I don't get a weekend off. Okay.
Yeah, tragically on my phone, I don't have my soundboard either. So I can't play any music. It's going to be just a cold, hard, stale stop. So sorry about that. Anyway, all right.
Maybe we could have a sing-along. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Bye.
Yeah. See ya.